All right. So I'm just testing out my equipment. So I thought maybe I would just sort of come online and sort of introduce myself. My name is Eric, and I am actually in the process of starting a political live stream. And officially, the show is going to debut on Monday. On Monday at, I believe, 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I think the plan is to start our show at, what would that be? 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The time difference between where I'm at in Arizona and where my partner's at in Virginia is it fluctuates from the East Coast and the West Coast. So anyway, we are planning on doing a political live stream every Monday, and we were going to be starting next Monday. And I thought I would just test out my equipment and my stream to see if it's working correctly. See if anybody's out there that's interested in talking about the Democratic debate, which I missed because I was sitting here trying to put this all together so I could test this out. But I did see some comments online. I went ahead and retweeted some comments on my Twitter account, which if anybody is watching on YouTube or Facebook, because I am doing a multi-stream on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I'll put the banner out here so that you know where to find us on Twitter. That's at Liberty Starship. Liberty Starship. Liberty Starship is going to be the name of our show. We're going to be, as I mentioned, we're on Facebook. We have a Facebook page also at Liberty Starship. And also YouTube is called Liberty Starship. So I do see some numbers out there. So I'm curious if anybody who watched the debate has some insight or has some comments, because I would love to get into them and see what you guys think out there and see who's out there right now and who's interested in sort of where you're coming from. Are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican? Libertarian even, independent, Green Party, that kind of stuff. I'll put that full disclosure out there for anyone that's curious about me. I am a registered Republican. I consider myself either a sort of constitutional conservative, or I also like to call myself sort of a member of the libertarian-leaning section of the Republican Party. I was a Ron Paul supporter when he made his last presidential run. That's actually what got me into being more active in politics. Prior to that, I would vote, and that was about it. But the first campaign that I actually got involved with was the Ron Paul campaign. And so that's kind of what my perspective is, and that's where I've been at for the last, 12 years, I believe. So again, if there's anyone out there who's interested in talking about Democratic debates, or anybody who's interested in talking about anything else regarding politics or what's going on, I've actually been following a lot about the coronavirus and kind of seeing what people are saying about that. I've been following some interesting YouTubers who are doctors who are giving out a lot of interesting information. And actually, probably on our first show, I'm going to delve right into that and start talking about some of the political ramifications of the coronavirus, and also the sort of contrast, or the sort of problem you have between people that believe in liberty, and how do you fight an epidemic, a pandemic, because there are many experts now saying that we are in a pandemic. How do you fight a pandemic in a liberty context? How do you keep your rights in a situation like that? What are your rights? Do you have any? That kind of a thing. Those kind of questions, I think, need to be asked. They need to be asked now, before this pandemic actually hits the United States in earnest. So those are the kind of things that I want to talk about on my show that's coming up. I do have a partner in the show. His name is Peter. I talked to him earlier, and he said that he would probably be doing a video similar to the one that I'm doing right now, that he would probably do one later in the week, definitely before our official broadcast on Monday. And he'll be introducing himself. I did meet him through the Arizona Liberty Caucus, which was a nonpartisan nonprofit organization. It was an official one. I can't remember the qualification that it had, but basically it's the qualification for a nonprofit that is supposed to be. The way it was explained to me, it's like 75% educational and then 25% political. So that was a designation that we had, and that group was actually a pretty interesting group. It was a very eclectic group. We had people that were anarchists in that group, and we had people that were very, very conservative people in that group, and everything in between that you can possibly imagine. People that were there because they had all sorts of different concerns, ranging from economic to foreign policy to police brutality. We had all sorts. We had a really good mix in that group. I quite frankly miss those days, and that's one of the reasons that I want to do this show, and that's why I've set up these various accounts. Is because I miss those days. I miss talking to people about that stuff. It was hard as an organizer in that group because we did have some ups and downs. We had as I progress maybe through this show and through what I'm trying to accomplish here, maybe I'll be able to talk about some of those stories, with Peter on the air, so Peter can kind of keep me honest and he can give his perspective while I'm kind of talking about how I remember things, because that group hasn't been active in several years now. But again, if anybody wants to talk about anything, the chats are open. I'm going to keep, I guess, talking a little bit more about myself for the next couple of minutes, even if nobody joins in. I can see that I have viewers, but apparently nobody is really chiming in and giving a little comment right now. So more about me. Again, my name is Eric. My co-host is going to be, his name is Peter. I'm based in Arizona. And I've spent most of my life here. I did actually live and went to school in Vermont for a period of time. I also lived and went to school in Oregon for a period of time. So from one end of the country to the other, I have been in my lifetime. I was in the Navy Reserve for about 6 years. I was never deployed overseas, but during my annual training, I was, again, pretty much on both sides of the country. I used to primarily go to my annual training in Coronado at the North Island Naval Air Station at North Island. And then I also participated in Fleet Week one year, which was an amazing experience. Got to take a little cruise on the USS Kearsarge from Norfolk to New York City. That was an amazing experience, I have to say. That was post 9/11. And at that time, New Yorkers really loved the military. It was a really amazing experience in that regard. It was terrible work. I was part of the security force, the Naval Security Force, and was responsible for securing the dock that we were at, because there are no naval bases in New York City on Manhattan Island. So we were actually at a cruise ship terminal. And my responsibility, I was a master at arms, which is the equivalent of military police in the Navy Reserve and the active Navy. And so I was assigned to the Naval Security Force when I was in New York. And I can say that the work was not pleasant. And some of the people I worked with were not pleasant. And that's another story, maybe for another time, when we talk about things like the military and talk about I can talk about my experiences and some of my insights about that, specifically with the Navy, and talk about, I think, what a lot of people are interested in talking about, which is the role of our government and our military in terms of intervention overseas. I know right now, for instance, Bernie Sanders is running on a non-interventionist platform, as I understand it, which is very interesting. He's been a great advocate for that, I think, for a very long time. And I think that it's fair to say that, for instance, Biden would be very different regarding intervention and foreign policy. That's definitely something that we want to talk about on our show because, I mean, let's face it, there's few issues that we deal with in politics that are bigger than war and peace. That's where lives are on the line, and that's where lives are lost. It's because of issues of intervention and war and peace. And of course, there's more than one kind of intervention. We can intervene with money. Recently we've had a lot of controversy. In fact, that the entire impeachment of President Trump was predicated on the notion that he was withholding aid from the Ukraine for political reasons. So we can see how intervention, foreign intervention, can have all sorts of interesting and often unintended consequences. So if anybody wants to talk about that, I'd be more than happy to talk about it. It's definitely something we plan to talk about on our show. So as far as my background goes, I'm trying to think what else would be good to talk about in terms of a little bit of an introduction about me. As I said, my name's Eric. I'm based in Arizona. I would call myself sort of in the libertarian wing of the Republican Party, although I don't think that's exactly a great description. But I do have a comment here, so I'm going to go ahead and share that. So Shaken Bacon 555 says, "When will Steyer drop out?" And I'll be honest, I haven't heard much about the status of Steyer's campaign, so I don't really know. The main thing that I've heard is a lot of people feel like Biden is in sort of a make or break position right now in South Carolina. That's the last thing that I heard. I hadn't heard much about Steyer's position. A lot of that, of course, comes down to their financing. I did hear that Elizabeth Warren took out a loan, I believe $3 million loan because she's running out of money, which is that's a pretty bad sign for a campaign. But I haven't heard anything about Steyer. So, I've heard a little bit about Biden and Elizabeth Warren as far as the status of their campaigns. I think everybody sort of agrees right now that Bernie Sanders is in the best position right now, certainly in terms of delegates. But of course, Bloomberg is in the best position when it comes to money because Bloomberg has essentially unlimited funds. I saw an interesting comment on Twitter. I don't remember if I retweeted it or not, but I saw somebody talking about how they were disgusted that they saw a Bloomberg ad during the debate. And that does, I think I have seen political ads during the debate before, but you would kind of think that they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't allow that, even though obviously that literally is prime time. And I'm sure the network charges an arm and a leg for having your own political ad during a debate that they're televising. They probably charge a great deal of money for that. But it doesn't seem like it's a good thing for our republic. I don't think it's a good thing for democracy, if you will. The fact that people are allowed to run their own political ads during a debate. That doesn't seem quite fair, does it? But I also would say, from my perspective, that's up to the network to decide that. I don't think necessarily there should be a law banning that, but I do think that citizens and people should be responsible and say, you know what? Maybe because this network has that practice, maybe we won't watch this. Maybe we won't watch their network. Maybe we won't support it. But that's, of course, the problem with the sort of libertarian perspective in general, is it requires action on behalf of the citizens. The citizens have to be proactive. They can't be passive. So that's a reason that I think the Libertarian Party is so small and, quite frankly, ineffective, is because in order to make that work, it actually does require people to be very active. And that's one of the reasons that instead of being in the Libertarian Party, I'm in the Republican Party, because at least the Republican Party has some pragmatism to it and is involved in governance, whereas the Libertarian Party, for the most part, is not. That's It's just the reality. I mean, if you're a libertarian and you take offense to that, I'm sorry, but the reality is that there are very few libertarian politicians that are actually in office. And in some ways, I feel like that's by design. Because as I mentioned, in the political group that I was in, the Arizona Liberty Caucus, which again was a nonpartisan group, when I was an organizer in that group, we had libertarians in that group. Big L libertarians, Libertarian Party, and sort of small L libertarians, as I would call it, who are just Republicans. Incidentally, we didn't. I still haven't met a small L libertarian Democrat. I would love to meet one, and I would love to have one on the show. And I would love it if someone who was a small L libertarian Democrat, contributed to the show by comments or something like that, because I've never met one. I'm trying to think if because the in the Ron Paul campaign we had a very eclectic mix of people, and I can't remember if anybody I met was a registered Democrat. I did meet many people that were independents and hadn't voted in a long time, and they were active in the Ron Paul campaign. That's one thing that was pretty inspirational to me at the time. Was I met a gentleman who was probably of the hippie generation. He was a he was a tree doctor, and I remember meeting him, and he hadn't voted since like the mid '70s or something like that, because he was so disillusioned with politics. My guess is, I'm just assuming because of the time frame, that Nixon and all of that just completely disillusioned him from politics, and he hadn't voted for anybody for any office since around that time period, since the mid '70s. And he actually got involved with the Ron Paul campaign to the extent that he actually went to the dinner that it was, I think, $300 a plate dinner that Ron Paul had in Mesa, Arizona, that year that he was running for president, running for the Republican nomination, and one of the debates was in Mesa, Arizona. So anyway, I do apologize to the one commenter that I got, and I didn't have a good answer for the question. But one of the things that I'm hoping is as this show develops an audience, that we can make it a true network amongst ourselves, where we can pass information to each other. We can kind of let each other know what we're all hearing, because what that does is it increases our power exponentially when we have people all over the country, possibly even all over the world, through the internet, that can comment and give us sort of a boots on the ground perspective of what's going on. And the fact of the matter is, you can't be an expert at everything. That's one of the problems, I think, with the mainstream media, is there's this sort of almost idea that so many people there are some sort of expert on everything. And of course, journalists are experts on nothing. So that's why they always have experts, quote unquote experts, that they're talking to and getting information to, or getting information from, I should say. Not sure if I think I might have lost the stream for a second, but anyway, I'm coming up on 20 minutes, so I think I've babbled enough, and I've tested the software, and it looks like I almost went 20 minutes without the system hanging up or anything like that. I do apologize, Shake and Bacon 555, about your question and not being able to answer it very well. But if anybody else is out there and knows Shake and Bacon 555 and has some insight into that, please contact that person and let them know if you have any insight into that, when you think that candidate might drop out, or if you think that candidate is gonna bounce back and be on the rise. I'll tell you right now, I'll make a prediction which isn't based on very much. We're still early in the process, but I feel like Bloomberg is going to get the nomination simply because of the money, and that's very it's pessimistic of me. But that would be, right now, my gut reaction says that Bloomberg has a massive amount of money. I see his ads all over the place, even on YouTube. It's just ridiculous to me. Although I have seen some Bernie Sanders ads as well, so I know that he's positioned pretty well. I think his funding is pretty good as well. But Bloomberg, I feel like, is essentially just unlimited. That he's willing to literally put whatever he has to into the race to win it. So if I was to make a prediction right now, I think Bloomberg will get the Democratic nomination almost regardless of what he does. But we'll see. We'll see. South Carolina, I think, will be a fairly interesting test. Like I said, I've heard some people say it's a make or break for Biden, but that Biden actually might do quite well in South Carolina, and that might help him rebound his campaign. So anyway, we're just over 20 minutes. There's no other comments. I just want to introduce myself. I also wanted to get some content on my channels. And so we're coming up on 21 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and end this broadcast, and I hope you guys will come back and tune in on Monday. Again, it's going to be Monday, I believe, 5 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time will be the official debut of Liberty Starship with my co-host, Peter. And I am Eric, and I am signing off.